Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome to Customs Collage, Customs Collaboration Beyond the Age.
Customs college where you can learn anywhere, anything and anywhere about customs. Mighty only Indonesian Customs and Excise Training Center. Customs College, collaboration beyond the age.
First of all, we would like to thank the God, the Almighty, that has given us blessing to attend the first Custom Collage webinar on escalating threat from transnational organized crimes and how we can collaborate. I'm Nela.
And I'm Siti.
It's our greatest delight to be your MCs for today.
We would like to extend a very warm welcome to Bapak Bahaduri Wijayanta Bekti Mukarta, the Director of Enforcement and Investigation, Director General of Customs and Excise. And also welcome to Mr. Cole F. Brown, Mr. Bob Vanderberg, and Mr. Adam Bachelor as today's speaker.
Not to mention, best regards to all the participants who have joined us today. Before starting, we kindly ask all Zoom participants to rename the Zoom ID with the name used in the registration form and mute the microphone during the webinar to prevent any sound problem.
We would also like to remind all participants that you can access the materials and drop your questions via Slido by accessing the link below. And don't forget to fill both the registration and the evaluation form that will be available in the same link shortly, so you can get the e-certificate.
Well, Siti, do you still remember that last year in August, Indonesian Custom and Excise Training Center organized an international workshop that was attended by customs administration officers from 10 different countries. One of the agenda was transnational organized crimes and how customs in different countries have their own different scenes and methods to fight it.
Right, Nella. Transnational organized crimes have become a significant and growing threat to national and international security that could affect public safety and economic stability. And today's webinar is our effort to continue to communicate, coordinate, and collaborate together in fighting transnational organized crimes.
To kick off today's webinar, let's hear the opening speech by Bapak Hari Mulya, the Director of Indonesian Custom and Excise Training Center.
Honorable Director of Enforcement and Investigation, Bapak Wijayanta, UNODC Country Manager and License to Asian, Mr. Cole Brown, distinguished participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say how pleased I am to see so many of you gather here for this webinar. Please allow me to express my warm welcome to resource persons and participants from Indonesia and International Customs Administration. I am convinced that the presence of all of you will contribute to the value of this webinar discussion. Furthermore, I would like to give my hearty congratulations to the opening of this fourth series of Custom Collage for all of you who sincerely committed to this event to make it a success. Thanks for organizing this event that would have been impossible without the support of each and everyone present here. In this webinar, we have with us speaker whom I have no hesitation in describing as exceptional. And it is an honor for me to welcome Mr. Cole Brown, Country Manager and License to Association and of Southeast Asian Nation. I also believe that this seminar will be fruitful with the endeavor of all participants and under the full support Pak Wijayanta for kindly being our keynote speaker in this session. Our previous webinar, Custom Valuation and Transfer Pricing, was graced with positive feedback from the participants. Therefore, we are anticipated that today's seminar will afford you a valuable opportunity to gain new insight and knowledge that you help you go to beyond your limits. Distinguished colleagues, the term chosen for today's webinar is Escalating Threat from Transnational Organized Crime and How We Can Collaborate. Transnational organized crime poses a significant and growing threat to national and international security, with dire implications for public safety, public health, democratic institutions, and academic stability across the globe. Not only are criminal networks expanding, but they also are diversifying their activities, resulting in the convergence of threats that were once distinct and today have dangerous and destabilizing effects. Therefore, these issues to be discussed in this webinar will improve our understanding of the TOC threats in the region and how we can collaborate with partner nations to develop a comprehensive response. Once again, I would like to this opportunity to sincerely wish the regional webinar result in fruitful discussion and be successful in accordance with its objectives and be applicable to strengthen and provide safety to the world of a whole. I would like to wish you all good health and happiness. Finally, with those remarks, I would like to conclude my officially announce the opening of Custom College webinar series 4. Thank you for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Now, we would like to invite Bapak Bahaduri Wijayanta Bektimukarta, the Director of Enforcement and Investigation, Directorate General of Customs and Excise, to give a keynote speech. Pak Wijayanta, the time is yours.
Distinguished Pak Ari Mulyo, Director of Indonesia Customs and Excise Training Center, distinguished Mr. Collie Brown, UNODC Country Manager and Liaison to ASEAN, distinguished Mr. Adam Besseler, UNODC Strategic Trade and Export Control Trainer, and all of the participants in this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to all of us. It is indeed a great honor and a pleasure for me to be one of speakers in this webinar, Escalating Threat from Transnational Organized Crime and How We Can Collaborate here on such beautiful day. I would like to extend our deep gratitude to Indonesia Customs Excise Training Center for hosting the webinar, also for UNODC and also WCO Asia Pacific Vice Chair for the collaboration and support to this successful webinar. This is such a great opportunity for all of us learning about the law of concept and ideas from the expert, sharing our experiences about the threat of organized crime, and also how we could collaborate to combat this issue. Therefore, I also appreciate all of us who participate on today's meeting in a spirit of learning related to transnational organized crime. Ladies and gentlemen, transnational organized crime can be defined as a crime that is conducted overseas between one country to another. We believe that each country could be connected since the weighting of object of transnational crime. According to the 2019 report from UNODC, transnational organized crime, especially in Southeast Asia, have grown and evolved. Among many crimes that are organizationally committed, UNODC have narrowed into 4 kinds of crime, such as drug and illegal precursor smuggling, human trafficking, wildlife smuggling, and environmental related crime and fraud. Acknowledging the facts stated by UNODC and based on the law of 17 of 2006 on Custom Article 64A, Indonesia Custom as the Community of Protector has conducted special control on transnational crime. Currently, Indonesia Custom have mainly focused on drugs and illegal precursor smuggling, goods related to terrorism, wildlife, and cultural goods and smuggling, as well as intellectual property rights related to infringement goods. Indonesia Custom also takes a part in maintaining national and global security from extraordinary crime such as money laundering and terrorism. Indonesia Custom believe that transnational organized crime does not solely refer to only one object of crime. It is connected with other crime so that it raises risks to the national and global security. Therefore, it is appropriate that Indonesia Custom participate in maintaining world peace. In the strategic level, Directorate Enforcement and Investigation has built a custom and excess surveillance system for tracking transnational organized crime using 5 pillars of supervision concept, namely follow the good, follow the money, follow the transporter, follow the document, and follow the person. In the operational level, Indonesia Custom needs accountable and systematic coordination and cooperation in national level. Indonesia Custom has collaborated with some of ministry and national agencies such as Police, Terrorism Prevention Agency, Center of Finance Research and Analysis, Narcotic Agency, Immigration, Tax Organization, and Civil Administration. In eradicating illegal narcotic and precursor until July 30, 2020, Indonesia Custom collaborating with National Police and National Narcotic Agency have marked its commitment to combat narcotic and illegal precursor by seizing 1.6 tons of drug with total 430 cases. Recently, Indonesia Custom has collaborated with Special Detachment 80X of Anti-Terror and National Agency on Terrorism Prevention in detecting persons that are suspected of terrorism activities. In accordance with Article 64A and Law Number 17 of 2006 concerning Custom and Law Number 9 of 2016 concerning the prevention and eradication of terrorism financing crime, Indonesia Custom has currently carried out the identification and profile development of 4 persons identified as a suspected terrorism or member of terrorism organization for further examination when the suspected is entering or leaving Indonesia territory. With regard to combating terrorism, indeed, not only do we need to focus on the financing aspect of terrorism, but also need to focus on the good that is suspected relating to terrorism activities. The current ammonium nitrate explosion accident in Beirut, Lebanon, is a warning to all of us to comprehensively and properly manage dual-use good or weapon of mass destruction related good in order this item from falling into the wrong or irresponsible hands. Indonesia Custom and the Center Finance Research Analysis work together to prevent money laundering and control the cross-border cash carrier or CBCC and the border of Indonesia. According with the law of number 9 of 2013 13 on prevention and eradication of terrorism financing and law number 8 of 2010 on money laundering. Indonesia Customs is responsible for monitoring cash carrier related with prevention of money laundering, especially of tourism activities. In addition, Indonesia Customs also support national interest in fulfilling the requirement of becoming the member Financial Action Task Force. Indonesia Customs also cooperate with DCIPR and National Police in combating infringing goods in accordance with government regulation number 20 of 2017. Currently, Indonesia Customs has detained goods infringing IPR and has been developing the case to target and syndicate. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, transcrime does not work on specific object, but must be seen as a whole network of criminal groups that are influencing each other. With that characteristic, the effort to tackle transnational organized crime need to be carried out collaboratively by multiple agencies under a grand strategy that is interested to one agency and another. The difference is a country has on their focus to the object of transnational organized crime should not be a problem because its country has different consideration and interests. However, we must agree that the effort to narrow the movement of transnational organized crime must be effectively carried out because focusing on one particular crime does not mean neglecting other crime. In a publication issued by United Nations, it is specified that there are 4 criteria of transnational organized crime. These criteria are: first, the crime is committed in the one country. Second, the crime is committed in one country, but most of preparation, arrangement, direction, or control take place in another country. Third, the crime is committed in one country, but involve criminal organized crime group that commit crime in more than one country. Fourth, the crime is committed in one country, but it's bring a substantial impact to another country. To the context, it is a difficult time such as a current COVID-19 pandemic. The world seems to be isolated, but it does automatically stop the rate of crime. Currently, the new challenges have emerged. Not only do we need to fight transnational organized crime, but also we need to quickly adapt with the current global pandemic situation. On the one hand, there are a decreasing rate of crime on some sectors, but on the other hand, there is also increasing rate of crime in other sectors. The pandemic, of course, being utilized by transnational organized crime actors to commit crime at a time when people are compromising with the fear of pandemic. Nevertheless, this is a challenge for all of us, a difficult challenge indeed, but we should find a solution. It will become a tested and adaptive solution. Small example of such new challenge is the shift in modus operandi of a particular crime. The modus operandi of narcotic smuggling, for example, has been shifting from intensively smuggling by passenger to smuggling by using the sea route or in consignment, or even smuggled by border crosser or using land border road. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly, I am truly looking forward to our meeting today. The threat of transnational organized crime is real and will not stop only with the pandemic. An adaptive and a relevant solution may be a positive way for country in persecuting transnational organized crime. Thus, the key to disclose transnational crime group during current pandemic condition is being adaptive, vigilant, and having a proper synergy not only between agencies but also between countries. Therefore, We should keep upgrading our knowledge, collaborating, and moving forward together against the transnational crime. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Wijayanta, for the keynote speech.
Nella, before we enter the main event, maybe we can enlighten the participants a little bit about today's topic. What do you think?
Of course, Siti. I have our friends here that will give us a brief explanation about it. Please give applause to Jane and Tirta.
Hi Tirtha, how are things?
Hi Jane, never been better. Oh hi, there are participants. Welcome back to Customs Collage, Customs Collaboration Beyond the Age.
Tirtha, have you heard about the increasing of synthetic drug market in East and Southeast Asia?
Seems like it's very serious, you know?
Yeah, that's only one of many issues that we face in crime and drug challenges here in Asia and the Pacific, and many of them are transnational.
That's right, Jane. Well, this combination of threats posed by transnational organized crimes have been facilitated by ease of money laundering and relatively weak border control framework.
That's exactly what I think. Well, Tirtha, we need a collaboration among all countries in Asia and the Pacific to encounter those kinds of threats. I've heard that today we will have a seminar about transnational organized crime and how those countries can collaborate.
Sounds great. We can get many useful information then. Let's join in, Jane.
Well done, Jen and Tirta. And Nella, it's now the time that we have been waiting for, presentations regarding the escalating threat from transnational organized crimes and how we can collaborate. I heard that we have 3 special speakers with us today.
Yes, Siti. First, we will welcome Mr. Collie F. Brown, the Country Manager of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, and liaison to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon. I won't spend too much time. The previous speaker already touched on some of the points that I want to share, so I will rather try to just elaborate and highlight a few pertinent issues. First, let me say hello to everyone, and again to the Directorate General of Excise and Customs for organizing this event, and we're pleased to participate and to collaborate as well. I'll also and I'll see if I can unmask myself. I also want to acknowledge my other UNODC colleagues who are here, and of course as I see over 400 participants that's on the platform this afternoon. I'm going to provide a quick, if I can, see if I can figure this thing out. I probably should have done a test before I did this. I'm not sure. I'm trying to share the screen. I'm not sure where it is. If I can't find it, I'll just keep going. Anyway, I had a PowerPoint, but I'm not able to pull it up.
Okay, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
maybe before you start your presentation, we could introduce you first.
Oh,
Okay, is that okay with you?
sure.
Sure. So Mr. Brown was appointed to his current post in October 2015. Prior to this assignment, he was the advisor for criminal justice in UNODC country office, Pakistan.
He served for a period as the officer of charge, where his portfolio also included border management, counter narcotics, human trafficking, and migrant smuggling, among other areas.
And as for the second and third speakers, we have Mr. Bob Vandenberg, a law enforcement expert, and Mr. Adam Bachelor, the strategic threat and export control trainer for the UNODC Container Control Program that has joined us from Vienna, Austria. Morning, sir.
All right.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Mr. Vandenberg brings a wealth of law enforcement expertise and experience. He has a lot of experience in international cooperation to improve port security, to fight organized crime, and to assist the governments to maintain the strengthened maritime, border, air container, cargo controls.
And as for Mr. Bachelor, in his role as a trainer, he interacts with many officials throughout the world delivering CCP training. Prior to joining the CCP team over 7 years ago, he contributed his knowledge and expertise with the International Atomic Energy Agency's Office of Nuclear Security for over 7 years.
Well, Mr. Brown, Mr. Vandenberg, and also Mr. Adam, on this very happy occasion, we are already joined by hundreds of participants, not only custom officers, but also the general public that have joined us via Zoom and YouTube.
And some of the participants that have registered include officers under Ministry of Finance and other officers from various government institutions in Indonesia.
International Customs Administration from Australia, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bhutan, Cambodia, China, Iran, Jamaica, Japan, Laos, Malaysia, Maldives, Mongolia, Fiji.
And also custom administrations from Myanmar, Nepal, New Zealand, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Republic of Korea, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Timor-Leste, United Kingdom, and Vietnam. And last but not least, the general public that has joined us live via YouTube.
Well, and without further ado, for the next 60 minutes, Mr. Brown, Mr. Vandenberg, and Mr. Aldam will talk about escalating threat from transnational organized crime and how we can collaborate. Sir, the time is yours.
Thank you again. And again, let me also acknowledge Mr. Vijayanta, the Director General of Customs and Excise, and as well Mr. Hari Mulya, the Director of the Training Center at the Customs and Excise Directorate. I don't know if you're seeing I think I was able to get my PowerPoints up for a minute. Are you seeing anything? Okay, let me try again. Here we go. There we go. Can you see my screen? If I can just get a confirmation.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. All right. So let me just take a few minutes and just share some perspective on the issue that was touched on, and of course the focus of this presentation today. I'm going to focus primarily on Southeast Asia, and I'll draw from some of the work that was cited earlier, the Transnational Organized Crime Threat Report that we did middle of last year, which I think carries much relevance for the discussion that we're having as well. The report, I think, paints a very troubling picture of criminal networks exploiting borders across the region to ply their activities. In some parts of Southeast Asia, certainly, and neighboring regions, we've seen law enforcement suppression efforts changing trafficking patterns. However, this has been countered by these networks, which simply scale up and migrate the operations to areas, particularly those that have porous borders and weak governance structures. We see, and as was noted, one of the areas that was looked at in the report was regarding the trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. We continue to see exploitation in this area, where these groups are exploiting the differences in economic development and as well as the demand for cheap labor. Later on, I'll talk a little bit about what the impact of COVID and what that has meant for much of this environment. But certainly, I think the value that is to be made from most of these organized crime group activities is very lucrative, and in many instances we are seeing high value and pretty low risk for them in terms of carrying out these activities. As a result of that, I think we continue to see a proliferation of these activities across the region. Certainly in terms of trafficking in persons, we see women making up a very large proportion of those of victims. We see there on the screen not only the patterns, but also the breakout in terms of male versus females. Certainly, we know children as well are affected by this phenomena. We know as well that some of the victims, particularly members of the Rohingya groups, have been certainly vulnerable as well to many of these groups, particularly from migrants being smuggled from the Bay of Bengal to Malaysia. We recently have heard some of the reports in terms of maritime movement of many of these groups and the awful condition that they're facing. And certainly, I think these conditions certainly creates huge vulnerabilities for them, not only them, but for any other groups or individuals. People who tend to be vulnerable are at particular risk for much of that. And so we do see the market estimate in terms of the amounts collectively across the region in terms of the market size, anywhere from estimated being from 132 to 196 million dollars per year that these groups have been able to generate. The issue of environmental crimes, of course, and wildlife and timber continues as well to be of major concerns. We do see continuing efforts by these groups in terms of trafficking into and out of the region, which again requires the collective efforts of agencies, law enforcement agencies, and governments across borders if there's going to be any success in trying to mitigate this issue. Again, we have seen major seizures of illicit wildlife products in the region. That this slide just depicts some samples of recent seizures that we've seen, particularly pangolin is particularly one that has been seen as very attractive, and the scope of trafficking in that area is certainly one that continues to be of significant concern and requires, I think, robust effort by law enforcement if we're going to see successes in terms of that. Counterfeit goods and falsified medicines, that clearly is an area that particularly now, especially now in the advent and the environment of COVID, where we're seeing an expansion really. And this report was done last year, and these are some of the estimates in terms of the profits from these not only counterfeit goods, but also in terms of falsified medicines. Since the advent of COVID, we've seen significant expansion of this issue, where the pandemic has certainly brought dramatic spikes in some sectors, particularly medical devices, pharmaceutical products, e-commerce, and so on. we've seen significant spikes in the proliferation of these goods moving across across borders, which certainly requires, again, as I said, certainly requires particular focus. For example, we're seeing falsified medical masks being seized in countries around the globe. Two in particular, I recall Italy and Spain. Spain and Italy had very large seizures of attempts to smuggle vital equipment that had related to the pandemic. Some of these, of course, are falsified goods, but certainly some of these are where organized crime groups have infiltrated legitimate businesses and use those legitimate business to ply and to move goods that they're profiting from. So clearly, I think the pandemic has certainly opened up new avenues and open up new spaces for these groups to operate in. I'll talk a little bit later on about other aspects of the pandemic that I think we need to give particular attention to. But let me continue in terms of just some further perspective on the proliferation of counterfeit goods across the region. Clearly, this is an area, one, again, as I said, has very high profits. We continue to see increases in the number of seizure cases of goods from various countries in the region. And again, as I said, some efforts around how countries are cooperating across borders to detect and interdict some of these efforts is clearly needed. I'll just talk a little bit about the issue of illicit drugs, heroin and methamphetamines. Clearly, the pandemic in this case hasn't really had much of an impact on these groups. The proliferation of and the trafficking of particularly methamphetamine has continued unabated. It seems our estimate last year was that the area is now 60 plus billion dollar at the top end business. We've seen a market decrease in the trafficking of heroin, which has certainly been replaced by methamphetamine. This region is becoming the epicenter for methamphetamine production and trafficking. And again, it does highlight and I think raise the need for attention to this area. Much of this, again, is really what we're seeing is not only a decrease in demand for heroin and also a decrease in the production of heroin, but also much of this is really as a result of the region really undergoing a profound change in the regional drug market, where we're really seeing a move from opiate to synthetic drugs, as well as we're seeing much of this being a result of displacement in terms of from one country to the next, particularly up in the Golden Triangle area, where we see, particularly along in the Myanmar area, along that Shan State area, where we're seeing a lot of displacements taking place and new production sites being set up. And so the shift to synthetic drugs in this region is one that I think should be a concern to governments across the region. The scope of seizure, again, is really an indication that this is really a primary driving factor in the expansion. And as I mentioned, the displacement of organized crime groups to this area in the Golden Triangle is certainly one that requires attention. The number of labs that have been dismantled in that area in countries such as China as well, and displacement of some of that across the border into countries in that region. Um, the increases in flow continues. We've seen Thailand, for example, having engaged in some very successful operations in terms of trying to interdict some of that, but we still do continue to see changing patterns of trafficking, moving from one border to the next that are seen as being much more pliable, and so that they can continue unabated. Again, I just wanted to run through a few of these. I don't want to take up too much time, but what we also do see are some commonalities in terms of these trafficking groups. If you see the slide where you're seeing very much similarity in packaging and so on, which does indicate either collaboration, but also I think it does indicate similarities in terms of the groups that are involved and the groups that are pushing this product, that we'll see these packages showing up in various countries around the region. One of the things I'll just add here is that I think there is a concern as well regarding the ability or the capacity to detect and interdict precursors. We're seeing high production, of course, and particularly when we're talking about synthetics, where you do have the need for precursor chemicals. And clearly, the trafficking of precursor chemical is equally as concerning and troubling. But we are not seeing significant seizures of precursors. And what that suggests to us is that either there is a lack of capacity in terms of identification and interdiction. But I think that's an area I think that governments really do need to pay some attention to. So it's essentially business as usual, which clearly we'll need to pay some attention to. So just in closing, I just wanted to some thoughts in terms of some potential responses in terms of development of a comprehensive and functional strategy to address transnational organized crime in this region, recognizing the problem and building strategies through existing mechanisms, cooperation mechanisms, increasing measures to address the demand. There's a huge demand, certainly, and so we're seeing the trafficking to support those demand. But also think there is a need to strengthen the capacity to collect data and to report and share those data and information both domestically but also with neighbors, and also to reduce the disparities in the capacity gaps. As I said, we do see where these groups do take advantage of more weaker borders or countries that have weaker governance mechanisms in place. And I think there's a need really to reduce those capacity gaps and to improve the cross-border cooperation, intelligence sharing, law enforcement operations, and so on. And as well, to give particular attention to each of these transnational crime. As I referenced the issue of precursors, where certainly I think there's a need to build capacity around detecting and interdicting the movement of precursors around the region. But I think I'll just end by saying, the environment of COVID, I think, has offered and opened up increased opportunities for many of these groups, whether that, as sometimes we refer to them as governance type organized crime groups, to insert themselves, whether it's to enforce lockdowns and other restrictions imposed by governments, but also, as businesses are suffering from the lack of traffic and the lack of being able to generate revenues. Many of these businesses are finding capital flows to be a challenge. And here we'll see organized crime group begin to step into this space, whether it is to provide necessary capital for some of these businesses to continue operating, and over time potentially of actually taking over these businesses and now positioning themselves where they now have legitimate businesses that they can continue to operate. So I think there's a need for vigilance across not only this region, but I think there's a need for vigilance across the globe in terms of trying to be vigilant and to identify those risk factors that may come about. And we see governments in terms of trying to assist citizens and business and so on in terms of flow of public funds that also could be at risk as well. And these are areas I think again that I think we collectively there ought to be efforts around trying to build the resilience against these groups stepping into these space. So I will stop here. I did provide some resource, and I can share this with the organizers. Then they can share that. They can share this PowerPoint with you. But I did share some resources for those of you who might be interested. So I'll stop at this point, and thank you very much for the opportunity and your attention. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for the presentation. Now we would like to invite Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Bachelor to present the presentations. Please, sir.
We have a vehicle in there, so we'll check if it's tolling.
We thought there may be some interesting stuff. Now we're opening.
The CCP was established in collaboration with the World Customs Organization to help countries implement their obligations under the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. The main goal is really to provide capacity building to participating countries by training their officers in the port control units, as well as their air cargo, to be able to profile containers and find the illicit goods to disrupt the trade by organized criminal groups. We have really achieved a lot because the program has trained thousands of officers in over 50 countries, and every year we carry out many training sessions.
So this is why we talk about nuclear weapons, usually as one of the key concerns when we talk about WMD.
It's not the point of basically having big machines scanning every single container. It's impossible, we know that. It's about profiling the right containers.
Doing analytical work on documents, our port control unit members identified that these two containers are going to Afghanistan, and also the routing was quite suspicious, so that's why they decided to scan firstly. We decided together with our donors to open the new unit in the border with Turkey, which is very risky point.
We also do the so-called mentoring training with the officers in a variety of units. So we don't just let them be, we keep in touch with them, but we also understand that it is them who have really to do their work.
Okay, so we welcome Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Bachelor. Sir?
Hello, thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Now, first of all, greetings out of Austria in Vienna. First, good morning to you already. Good afternoon. And I'll propose that we jump directly into the presentation so we can move forward. So would it be possible to share the presentation, please? Okay, thank you very much. So again, good morning. Container control program. As we all are aware, let's say on an annual basis, we have around 750 million TEUs moving across the globe, which is enormous. But less than 2% of those containers, in fact, are cargo being inspected, which clearly is a very low figure. So in this sense, in 2004, the Container Control Program has been launched, in fact, by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, together with the World Customs Organization, in fact, with the objective, the intention to establish what we call interagency units in maritime ports, dry ports, land borders, railways, and airports. The objective, in fact, is to target, let's say, to identify potential high-risk consignments. And we've got two components within our program which are very important. First of all, clearly security related. We want to assist governments avoiding that containers, that cargo is being contaminated. But on the other hand, we are also looking at facilitation of trade, meaning that we want to avoid that the chain of trade is being delayed in a way. So we want to avoid that customs officers, law enforcement officers, in fact, will be conducting physical inspections of containers without any reason, so in a random way, because this way we would be slowing down the chain of trade. So in a way, we want to come to a point where we conduct less inspections and where we, in fact, will obtain more results. If you can please go to the next slide. Yes, next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see, so as I mentioned, it's a global program. It's a global program. Can we go one back, please? It's a global program, and as we could see on the slide just before, in fact, you will see that we have like 72 participating countries in our program. Most of the countries, I mean, we do have operational units. In some of the countries, we already have delivered training. You will also notice the corner at the right below, let's say, also the region that affects you, of course. And we do have a regional coordinator based in Bangkok, which covers South Asia and Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. And in the next slide, you will see, in fact, the structure of our program. As I just mentioned, so in fact, we've got the UNODC headquarters team. So Adam is part of that team, I am part of that team. We are both stationed in Vienna, in Austria. We work together with the World Customs Organization, which means, in fact, that we've got a fixed team of trainers who are based in Brussels, the headquarters of the WCO in Brussels. And below, you can also see the regions, in fact, where we are operational. As I just mentioned, in fact, each region, in fact, has got its regional coordinator. Myself, for example, I've been regional coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I was stationed from 2014 till 2019 in Panama, where I was responsible for the implementation of the program, in fact, in Latin America and in the Caribbean. But as you know, I've been transferred, in fact, last year to headquarters, and we are working now, or I am working now together with the headquarters team, having an overview at our activities across the globe. Next slide, please. As you can see, of course, also CCP Women's Network, that's important for us. I mean, to promote women's role in the program and gender equality in law enforcement profession, it's important. Let's say women tend to be underrepresented in law enforcement professions. So to promote women inclusion and participation in our container control program, a women's network was launched in 2015, and a gender training module has also been introduced to the CCP training package. By working actively to mainstream gender, our program in fact contributes to developing institutional and professional capacities relevant to respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the rights and possibilities for women and girls, in addition to also creating conditions to be in a position to claim their rights to be active agents of change. Although, let's say, the female CCP officer generally remain still underrepresented in the program, the number, in fact, has been on the rise since 2015. Next slide, please, and I'll hand it over here, Adam, to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Batchelor, and continuing on from Mr. Vandenberg, we value training within the container control program. Training, as you see in this slide, one of the mantras that we use is a crawl, walk, run approach. This phased approach is one of the core elements of the container control program, as I mentioned. Training phase one, theoretical and practical training, where we have 2 weeks each to learn about different elements depending on the environment. The container environment for sea cargo, to look at the containers, the documents needed. Also to emphasize the method of communication. And that's one of the core elements that this webinar talks about, and the need to share information, but to share it in a responsible manner. And one of those mechanisms is hosted by our partners, the WCO, through the Customs Enforcement Network, and it's called the ContainerCom. ContainerCom allows communication not only within the container control program, but also with other customs administrations throughout the world when it comes to actionable information. The theoretical, the practical training, these are a bit challenging for us at this time, but we are still looking at carrying out these activities. Phase two, once ideally the unit is up and running, we do advanced training, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We'll also try to have some regional focus training. So similar to what Indonesian Customs and Excise Training Center is hosting this webinar, we try and work with regional activities and regional entities as well. Phase three, the running phase, if you will, is work study tours. It's good to experience activities and knowledge from our fellow officers throughout the world. So we'll arrange those activities. The blue arrow at the bottom runs throughout, and you heard it in the video, mentorships and follow-up visits. And we're doing this even now in these times of COVID, where we can't have face-to-face. Number at the bottom, the 2019, we had 250 training events, number of participants, and we're working on the gender balance, as we heard. The Women's Network, it celebrates a 5-year anniversary this year. So it's a work in progress. Next slide, please. A couple of advanced trainings in particular. On the left is the Law Enforcement Assistant Program to reduce tropical deforestation. We commonly refer to that as LEAP. This is a program in concert with Interpol and the Norwegian Center for Global Analysis, with support from Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative in 2018. Very active in Indonesia with coordination through the Directorate of International and Public Affairs. A training was conducted in Indonesia, in Surabaya, in November of 2019. There's some activities on the horizon. Unfortunately, the physical in-person is limited or non-existent right now, but sharing of information is emphasized because there's going to be a webinar with colleagues from the Port of Antwerp in Belgium in October of this year for experience. Under the LEAP program, there's also going to be some training to support Indonesia in strengthening capacities in November as well. And these are certainly thanks in large part to our colleagues that are based there in Jakarta, especially our colleague, Mr. Topan Cesar, that is instrumental in coordinating the positive interactions that are taking place to emphasize that we work together to take positive action. On the right, you see strategic trade and export control training. That's what I, with several other colleagues, deliver. This is a longer training because it's rather a complicated subject. However, our goal is to integrate it into the methodology of the container control program. And in the next slide, we'll talk about that. But some of the images you see in this picture, some examinations for timber. The bottom slide, these are a few years old, I apologize, but examples from Peru and others. On the right, you see some images from Afghanistan, from Jordan, from Georgia. So again, to emphasize that the global nature, transnational organized crime. When it comes to strategic goods, I want to emphasize it's not only the transnational organized crime, but it is working with member states to meet international obligations. In particular, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540 of 2004, which addresses chemical, nuclear, biological means of delivery and the non-state actor. Next slide, please. Methodology, it goes back to several points made, and we look at the volume. Mr. Vandenberg mentioned it, Colleen mentioned it, the video mentioned it. The volume is so large. So the methodology applied and it's also used by most member states, most participants in this webinar. We can't look at 100%. It's just not feasible. So we need to be able to select those that have the highest risk. Now, the challenge is often with the documents that we have, we don't know what the violation is. We see that it is high risk. We make a decision whether to release it or to seize it. And when it comes to that element, seizing it, this is where the challenge often is compounded. And the reason being is if we focus on narcotics, drugs, and drug precursors, and it turns out there's another violation, if we don't have the proper training, if we don't have the knowledge and experience, and even some safety equipment, we may miss vital shipments that we should be stopping. And that's why we focus on not only the basic elements of targeting and risk analysis and examining these suspect cargoes, we have the advanced training that takes it a step further to enhance that questioning attitude of the officer. Back over to you, Mr. Vandenberg. Next slide, please.
Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Well, let's quickly also go through some of the results of our program. Again, when the program was launched in 2004, the main objective, in fact, was to look for drugs, but clearly there is more of illicit goods that are being transported by cargo than just drugs. And as you can see over here on the slide, I mean, we're also looking at commercial frauds. So we're looking at the revenues. We're also looking at IPR, so intellectual property rights, counterfeit. Clearly also very relevant in these times, fraudulent medicine. So we're looking also at substandard and falsified medical equipment. But Adam will also come back to this later on in this presentation. You already touched on the flora and fauna, in fact, environmental crimes. So the LEAP project that we are implementing. In fact, at this stage, we've got to focus on two regions, meaning the source region, Latin America and the Caribbean, where we are working in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil, trying to connect those countries, in fact, with your region. Meaning to intensify the international communication, the international exchange of information and experiences, Strategic goods and weapons, I think Adam just has been elaborating on this, so that doesn't need any more clarifications. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you will see these are the results, in fact, last year, 2019, which was quite an impressive year, to be honest. When we look at seizures of cocaine, you see 77 tons of cocaine have been seized by the container control port units, which is massive. But again, as stated before, we are looking at all kinds of illicit goods that can be transported by cargo. I already heard also that there has been touched up on the topic of the chemical precursors. Within our program, we do see already, let's say, quite some seizures when it comes to chemical precursors. I mean, we, let's say, integrate this into our system to target such kind of containers, but we also will come back very briefly on Lebanon also, because clearly this has shown that it's so important also not just to seize the goods, but also to have a follow-up afterwards, handling those goods in a safe way, how to store it, what about the disposal and so on. But again, we'll come back to that later on. As our colleague from UNODC also correctly stated, I mean, CITES is an issue. The units, as you can see, already have seized also the pangolin scales. We are also looking at ivory. Also waste, a very important issue, and we are having more and more interest also from our donors to invest into this topic also. And we're not just talking about the plastic waste, we're also looking at the e-waste. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you will see this is just, let's say, some to show you some best practices in a way, some of the seizures, in fact, of our CCP units, and I wanted to share those examples, in fact, because they show really how inventive, in fact, criminal organizations are when hiding the goods. As you can see, the image at the left, in fact, it's a load of timber in Bolivia and La Paz, a container with timber which was destined for Europe, and where in fact the cocaine was impregnated in the timber itself. So this was in fact a very difficult case, a very complicated case. But due to the targeting and let's say the insistent or persisting from our unit members, in fact, in the end, that they were able to detect the cocaine in the timber. This was a seizure of 1.4 tons of cocaine, which is quite impressive. At the right, you see also another modus operandi, which is quite frequent, not only used in Latin America and the Caribbean, but as you can see also in Pakistan, where we found around 177 kilograms of methamphetamine in the structure of a container. Another one in Pakistan when it comes to opium, where again the opium was hidden, in fact, in the structure of a container. I think the most impressive seizure, or the biggest seizure when it comes to cocaine, happened in Colombia this year, where the unit in fact seized 5 tons of cocaine in one container, where also, let's say, the criminal organization was quite inventive, where the cocaine in fact was hidden into the rubber. In fact, this was also in a container which was destined for Europe. Next slide, please. And then I'll hand it over again to Mr. Batchelor.
We've heard mention, and certainly COVID-19 has affected our work in activities. Knowing that we have a vital role, you see various pictures here. These are taken from the internet. That, as Mr. Brown mentioned, falsified or fake different items, from test kits that we see on the left, personal protective equipment, even other medical devices, including ventilators. The World Customs Organization initiated an emergency operation called STOP. Container Control Program was an element to that, and the Container Control Program made a presentation for the use. Since the STOP was rolled out very quickly, there wasn't a lot of time for training. So to educate the officers on these types of items, to be aware of it, and a mechanism again for communicating when suspect items were encountered. And again, these items were not focused just in one type of environment. These were found in container sea cargo. They were found in air cargo, land border crossing. So there was no limit to where these types of violations were found. I believe Operation Stop is concluded, or I know it was extended, but that is something that is coordinated with the World Customs Organization. Next slide, please. To emphasize the element of COVID-19, we threw this slide in just to emphasize how we protect ourselves. We have vital roles as keeping our country safe, working at the borders. So remember to use good personal hygiene habits. Wear the safety equipment. It is there to not only help you, but to help our citizens in our countries. So to wash our hands with sanitizers, soap and water, to wear shields or goggles as necessary, and to use face masks. In Austria right now, we have to use face masks for public transportation, using shopping, and gloves. Gloves, of course, are very helpful. Next slide. We have adapted. We had a large focus on in-person training. We still will pursue that because we see it's necessary to have that interaction, that human-to-human interaction. We are using a lot of online tools, e-learning, self-paced webinars that are being constantly adjusted, as well as remote mentoring and targeting support. In the future, we have gained quite a bit of information on how we can interact in this medium, this online medium. And we are looking at a blended approach when we deliver our training. So to take advantage of lessons learned, but not to discount the in-person interaction. In-person interaction is by far we believe the highest value and the highest return for interactions when we talk about sharing knowledge and information. Next slide, and back to Bob, please.
Thank you very much, Adam. Or maybe just wait. Yes, thank you. Well, as you can see over here, Lebanon, and I'm happy, in fact, during the introduction that Lebanon already has been mentioned as a kind of a lesson learned. Following the devastating explosion in Beirut, in fact, our UNODC staff, they were affected, but continued to operate as best as possible given the situation. But unfortunately, the same could not be said of our Lebanese container control program partners. And as such, the Director General of Lebanese Customs and his management team had sent a letter, in fact, requesting assistance related to the trade supply chain. Based on the request from the Lebanese Customs, in fact, CCP has conducted an initial assessment in Lebanon of the clearance procedures, the practical work related to targeting of high-risk shipments, because we believe that the CCP experts could assist Lebanese Customs to establish, let's say, the kind of a fast track clearance procedure, and also to help them to improve the security in the containerized trade supply chain. So therefore, in fact, I've been in Lebanon myself. I'm just back from yesterday. And the primary purpose of this CCP assessment, in fact, and the meetings I conducted over the last week, was to facilitate, in fact, the possible deployment of a CCP response team through an understanding of existing response process and procedures in the ports of Beirut and Tripoli, but also in the international airport, in fact, with the view to guiding future support. To be honest, there are many questions that remain to be asked and answered, but we believe that through the strength of our CCP that we can mobilize assets to contribute to this unique and demanding situation in Lebanon. The focus is, again, it's to work with Lebanese officials to facilitate legitimate trade as quickly as possible, while balancing an enforcement capability, but also clearly aware of continued and increased illicit trade related to constraints of the COVID-19, of course. Again, the situation in Beirut has identified that, let's say, the container port of Beirut, approximately 400, 500 meters distance away from the blast center, appear to have suffered minimal damage, in fact, but this still needs to be further assessed. But to meet the demands of not just only Beirut, but as the port was a significant lifeline to the country, but to assist the whole of Lebanon, in fact. If we would deploy a team, they would need to work with the Lebanese interagency team to get the trade moving through Beirut as soon as possible. Also part of the trade over there was redirected through another port, Tripoli, approximately 67 kilometers away from Beirut, but a port which lacks the level of oversight that Beirut had in place. In addition of the seaports, we're also looking at the CCP components for air cargo. So maybe a team to be dispatched to the Beirut International Airport to contribute to the Lebanese capabilities, let's say, to meet the demands also of moving larger cargo, while also incorporating, let's say, the enforcement component that I already have discussed a few times. Again, we are also working with the largest shipping companies to try to get access to the so-called pre-arrival information related to the container shipments, because clearly this would allow us to do the targeting and the selection of containers for physical examinations from a remote site. So in fact, what we are offering now to Lebanon, in fact, it's trying to support them in providing office spaces by prefabricated buildings. We are looking at improving the exchange of information at the national level among the participating law enforcement agencies, improving inter-regional cooperation also. We are looking at international exchange of information by providing access to the CCP developed communication platform, the container control program, to build in closer information exchange ties with shipping companies. We also are helping them, working with them together related to the safe framework of standards to secure and facilitate global trade. So as you can see, it's an entire package, in fact, where we are trying to support Lebanon. But I'll hand it over again to Adam, because clearly also Adam, as a trainer, has reacted to this situation. So Adam, over to you.
Thanks, Bob. And we heard from the director in his opening remarks the need to look at ourselves. And as Bob just mentioned, we took some of the lessons learned and integrated it into the container control program as a presentation on different types of chemicals, some of the hazards. We've incorporated an exercise that not only looks at the chemicals, and we started with the program Global Shield, which is the 15 most commonly used chemicals for improvised explosive devices, as identified by the World Customs Organization and UN Office on Drugs and Crime and Interpol. We have the participants review the manufacturer, the imports, exports related to their country, as well as the other identifying information, such as the chemical abstract service number and other safety information to enhance awareness that these chemicals exist potentially in the port, and then to ask questions, raise it to their chain of command to make sure that it's stored properly, it is handled properly, and if it's not, to try to influence the process to bring it in a better controlled environment. This is ongoing. We have mixed results. We've used this exercise in the last 3 trainings we've conducted online. We look at using this exercise in the future. But to emphasize, the container control program does not operate alone. It is one element in a government, in a country. So it could be a vital catalyst, if you will, to work with other law enforcement agencies, as well as with other safety factors when we're looking at not only the chemical ammonium nitrate that was stored in Beirut, but other types of chemicals.
Thank you very much, Adam. And then let's maybe go to the next slide, just to finalize. CCP lessons learned. As you can see, I mean, clearly, without any support from the government or from senior management, clearly it would be impossible to implement the container control program. So this is clearly one of the key actors to the success of our program and how to assist the governments. Human resources, rotation policy. What we do clearly when a unit is being established, we always try at least to avoid that there is like a very regular rotation of staff, meaning clearly the staff that we train, we try to keep them at least like 2-3 years in the same unit, because it wouldn't make any sense, of course, if we train people and then people after 2-3 months disappearing or maybe being transferred to, let's say, to other parts of the country or to other tasks. So in this sense, we try to build in, let's say, in modus operandis, and memorandums of understanding that we sign with countries to build this into this document. Sustainability, clearly, I mean, we are trying together with the countries to put a structure in place, something organized, which means, in fact, once you have got a structure in place, even if some of the persons would be replaced or other persons come in place, that we look to sustainability, that we've got a structure in place towards the future. Training, I mean, our program is, as we always say, it's not a quick fix. It's not just purchasing some equipment and just delivering once or twice training. What we are trying to do is that the regional coordinator of the program in the region and the trainers, they visit the units each 2-3 months as a kind of a follow-up together with the units. This also gives them the opportunity to possibly identify, let's say, additional specialized trainings which might add value to the units. Trainer, this is also part of what our trainers do, such as Adam, to try to identify also members that could become a trainer. In the end, we think that's very important, not just because it's somebody from the region and talks the language, but in the end, it's also a colleague with whom you are working each week. Then the information sharing, I think we already discussed this a few times, but I think it's so important to share information. It's not only, let's say, a sign of trust, it's also an anti-corruption tool when we work with interagency principles. It will only strengthen the country and the government. Private sector cooperation, I already mentioned it also in my Lebanon story. I mean, we need the private sector, but in the end, the private sector also does need us. I mean, they are looking at the facilitation of trade, but what we are doing with the program together with you is trying to add like a more secure component to this cooperation. UNODC staff on the ground, I mean, Topan is there, he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, whatever questions you might have, clearly is also at your disposal. We do have a regional coordinator also who is stationed in Bangkok and who is clearly also at your disposal if you might have any more detailed questions related to the program. Next slide, please. And then to finalize, as you can see over here, those are our donor countries. We are a funded program, which means without any funding, it would be impossible for us to implement the program. The LEAP, so the law enforcement program that Adam earlier has mentioned also, in which we have delivered training already in the region in Indonesia, and also the training that will take place in Antwerp involving probably some of you, has been funded by Norway. And well, in fact, this is it from my side. I don't know, Adam, if you have to add something also to finalize, but let me thank you again for the invitation and giving us the opportunity, let's say, to talk a bit about our program. And I would say over to you again in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Van der Berg and Mr. Bachelor for the presentation. Now we will have a Q&A session, and we already have participants that will ask the question live via Zoom meeting. So to I'm sorry, Halimatus Sada, please, ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay,
Hello.
we can hear your voice.
Afternoon. Thank you for the time, and also thank you for the great presentation for all the speakers. So I have one question. Maybe this is a little ridiculous, but I'm really I'm very curious about this. As we know, we human fight against the drugs and narcotics very centuries, so long we against the narcotic. So I'm very curious why we are not destroy the raw material to make the narcotic. I mean, we not why not we not destroy the raw material, the sources to make the narcotic, such as cannabis sativa for marijuana, paper sanivarium like for opium, and also extra sealant for made for cocaine. Why we not destroy the sources material, the raw material to make the narcotic? We not take along forever to against fight against the narcotic. Thank you, and I'm sorry for my bad English. Thank you very much.
Bob, I'll get a start if that's okay, and then we'll work on this together. You ask a question that we could probably speak about for days, and this presents a challenge because many of the chemicals. Let's talk about chemicals first, especially with psychotropic substances and manufacturing. Many of these chemicals are dual use. That means that they have many positive uses. So just to destroy them all, that's not a very good probability, and it's very difficult, especially when so many of these chemicals have good uses for mankind. When we talk about some of the materials for cocaine, which is a leaf. We talk about opium, which is another substance, and marijuana. There are different programs. Certainly, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime is involved with to try to eradicate, but there are many challenges associated with that. And that's an underlying theme for this webinar, where we talk about transnational organized crime, we talk about funding, illegal money sources, money laundering. These are all intertwined, where it is not an easy fix just to go in and wipe everything out. When we talk about certain types of narcotics, for example, if we were to wipe out all of the poppies producing that can produce heroin, this is also for medication, for pain relief, for allowing for anesthesia and things like that. So it's not so black and white. There are efforts. We have the International Narcotics Control Board, who their job is to look at the different chemicals, to have controls in place, to work with member states, to have checks and balances, if you will. There are organizations within, I think, all states that are participating in this webinar, but it's not foolproof, and that's why we all have a role to play, and we try to do our job as best as possible. Bob?
No, thank you, Adam. In fact, I mean, I don't have that much to add, but I mean, the chemicals, I mean, you're absolutely right, that's the W's. But when we look, for example, let's say the leaves with the cocaine indeed, or with the poppies, I mean, we got other UNODC programs who are handling this in a way. And we are in fact just a small part of this chain. I mean, our program, in fact, where we are looking at is like to target and to identify and then hand it over. I mean, so you've got a beginning stage at the source, in fact, where you've got programs looking at alternative development, also to see the erudition clearly of this, looking also because in some of the countries it's restricted, because as Adam correctly stated, this is being used, for example, for the fabrication of medicines. But all this, in fact, it's the beginning stage, and that's where we complement in a way. So we need also to make sure that we are not duplicating. But once that we have identified, in fact, and then the handover comes of the seizure as well, you also come into a next stage, because clearly then it needs to go to the prosecution office. I mean, it can't just be the seizure and then it stops over there. And there again, we've got like another program, which is the UNODC CrimJust, where we make sure that prosecutors are being connected with each other. So in this sense, clearly, I mean, we've got all the several components and we are just one of them in a way. But I think Adam, already I discussed or elaborated very well on this topic. So I hope this is clear for you.
If I can jump in, because I think the question is an interesting one, and I'll just say your English is fine because I understood everything you say. But if I can say, I think the issue is one between the legal and illegal legitimate movement and access to these chemicals. Clearly, I think you do have legitimate importation and exportation of these chemicals and these precursors. But we do know that sometimes even the legitimate importation, say for example, are sometimes diverted, or some of that gets diverted. I think the issue is really from that standpoint, I think there's the need for governments to strengthen their regime around access to movement of these chemicals to ensure that they're not being siphoned off and then trafficked and illegally. The issue of the illegal or the illegal trafficking of these chemicals is one that I think law enforcement and other regimes come into play to ensure that they can be properly detected, particularly when they may be crossing borders, that there is the capacity to not only find them, sometimes they are mixed in with other items, and so the capacity to find them, and then the capacity to ensure that they are being legally moved. And if they're not being legally moved, that they are then confiscated and the individuals who are involved with it are properly brought to book to be addressed. So I think clearly while international organizations such as UNODC and others can provide support around this, I think certainly on the ground the need for strengthening of these regimes, and certainly we do work with and assist our member states in these regards as well, along with our other INCB and so on. Certainly, I think it does require strengthening of regimes on the ground in countries to ensure that both the legitimate movement and access to these chemicals and the illegitimate movement and use of these are managed and controlled and so on. So I think it's a good question that I think we certainly need to pay attention to, because without that, I think it certainly hampers. Without these chemicals, it certainly hampers the illegitimate the production of these drugs. And to the extent where that can be controlled and disrupted, it certainly would have an impact on not only the production but certainly on the trafficking of these items. So thank you for the question. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And for everyone, we also give chance to participants who want to ask questions more. Please press the raise hand button and then unmute your microphone.
I noticed several questions in the chat feature, and I think we can give a chance. One of the first questions I've noticed is do we have any incidents of cocaine production outside of South America? My understanding, and Bob, please correct me, is cocaine production is focused in South America predominantly. Where it's grown. It needs certain chemicals to develop into the final product, but I have not to this date heard of cocaine being manufactured anywhere else but in South America. Bob,
No, Adam, you're absolutely right. But again, this is also, you've got several steps not to come to the final product. Meaning, in a first stage, in fact, you will come to the production of what we call the cocaine pasta, and it's afterwards the cocaine pasta which is being finalized to the final product, the cocaine itself. What we have already seen clearly is, in fact, that the pasta is being produced in the source country or the production country, and then afterwards that it's moved outside the country, so crossing the borders into non-producing cocaine countries, where they then finalize the product to cocaine, in fact. Very recently, in fact, also in the Netherlands, they had dismantled a very big laboratory, in fact, where this product or pasta was being finalized till cocaine. But as far as I know, to my knowledge, this is the first time in Europe that we have seen this. When it comes to Latin America, meaning Ecuador, for example, it's a gate out of cocaine. Out of Latin America and the Caribbean, it's not a producing country, but we are aware that there are quite a lot of laboratories in the jungle finalizing this product. That's it from my side.
Yes. The next question is how do you mitigate the surveillance of dual-use goods? So for example, ammonium nitrate that can be used as main ingredients of improvised explosive device. I'll first start. Mr. Brown actually touched on this. We tend to put different commodities as it relates to narcotics. Here we have improvised explosive device. There are some chemicals, for example, acetone. Acetone is a chemical used to produce cocaine. It can also be used as a precursor chemical for making an improvised explosive device. There's a number of efforts that have been identified. I mentioned Global Shield is one of those. There are informations that Interpol has produced, videos. Very simply put, we talk about risk analysis, risk indicators. There is not one hard, fast way, but we look at, does it make sense? Does it make sense that a company orders thousands of kilograms when previously they've ordered hundreds of kilograms? Are they ordering ammonium nitrate to do gardening, and yet this is a business that has nothing to do with gardening? So we have to look at those indicators, those risk indicators, to mitigate, as you say in the question, surveillance of these dual-use goods. And that's why, yes, systems are very good, but it's important that the human factor is involved to analyze and to check, does this make sense? The other element here is that we don't do it alone. It's not just customs, it's not just police. It's a mix of agencies that work in concert with each other, especially if we're not familiar with that particular chemical or that particular product. So we need to work together. We need to have good lines of communication. Bob?
No, I couldn't add anything more. In fact, I think you have been very, very detailed, Adam. But looking at another question, I mean, when we talk about the nuclear waste and chemical waste, are they dangerous because it can give exposure to bad health and human, even if it can make explosion, just as the one which happened in Lebanon? I mean, we discussed also, while I was in Lebanon, I was continuously in contact also with Adam, because clearly, I mean, we are trying to anticipate towards the future, which first of all means, I think the first thing is we need to make sure that we can towards the future identify such kind of containers coming into your port. I mean, that's the first thing clearly as well. I mean, we all know once a container is in a port and it stays more than 2 weeks, that's where the costs keep coming. Meaning if a container can be, let's say, considered as abandoned after some time, that nobody's asking for the container anymore, I mean, that should be an alert clearly to the customs officer, to the law enforcement officers working in the port, which means that your next step should be to go and talk with the shipping company to see what's wrong, because this might be a financial issue, this might also be another issue. Then when we come to the identification first, the first thing clearly that we would need to see is also have a look what is in the container. I mean, the goods, and compare it with the declared goods, because it might be that we have also a misdeclaration. That's one thing. And then clearly in the next step, it's also to have a look, how are you going to store this? I mean, in some countries, sometimes unfortunately, we see that containers are just like dropped or stacked in the container terminal. With temperatures going to 40, 45 degrees in the sun, staying for a while over there. We even don't know if it has been stored or the goods have been stored. There might be leakages when we talk about liquids. Even if you are going to move the containers, I mean, we will be looking also at the structure of the container. Can it be moved? But again, this is already a step, in fact, which is not a CCP competency or task anymore. In a way, this is not really within the mandate. With our program, what we are trying to do is to identify those containers. But then clearly, and this is where we do train also or assist governments, it's very important that you know once this container or cargo has been identified, who to address, who are your specialists in the country, which are the agencies that you need to contact. So this is clearly something where we do train people that you know who to contact in case you might identify such kind of containers. Adam, I don't know if you want to add something.
Just very quickly, Bob, and to emphasize the points raised by Bob, that we don't work alone, especially on such a challenging element as nuclear waste that's being smuggled. There are experts, certainly in Indonesia, we have Bataan and Bapatan that are there with, in addition to what's available in customs and excise. So we don't work alone. And one of the elements that the International Atomic Energy Agency worked on is to work with member states to be able to address these should they occur. We don't want them to occur, but to be prepared should they occur and the actions to take place next. So the question that you ask, we can't say specifically, it's a case-by-case situation, and there's a number of factors that would be evaluated and collectively worked upon. I'm going to jump very quickly, and there was a question about what about privacy laws in European? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So we have another participants that will ask the questions live. So we will go through that first. Please, Pak Beni Maya Wijaya. Please, sir.
Pak Beni, would you please to unmute your microphone?
Okay.
Okay, we can hear you, sir. Please.
Thank you very much, moderator. Good afternoon, colleague, all speaker. Thank you very much for the great presentation and sharing of the information. Director of Pak Hari Mulya, my sensei, Director Wijayanta, Pak Koli, Adam, and Vanderben. In the presentation, Pak Wijayanta already explained about how Indonesian custom tackle down the issue related with the transnational organized crime. And then UNODC explained further about the escalating threat, some issue related with the IPR, drugs, lead program, CCP, and etc. And the last part that you also mentioning about how it's related with the topic that of our webinar, how we can collaborate. I saw here mostly the participant is custom, not only from Indonesia. It's already mentioned some from the ASEAN, from the Asia Pacific, and how we can collaborate each other in here. That's why I would like to touch further with this issue, because as a custom administration, we under the WCO have already some tools and some we have a RILO custom enforcement network, and also we have doing cooperation bilaterally or with other international agency like Interpol and UNODC. And thank you very much. It's a UNODC have a close cooperation with the Indonesian custom. Mr. Adam also mentioning about some program that we already have it. But to stick with the how we can collaborate to combat the transnational organized crime, I think I suggest, or maybe it's can be discussed with the other and comment from the UNODC and my colleague. I take at least 4 or 5 issues that maybe it's good enough to discuss. First, the UNODC, how UNODC can contribute with the issue, because if based on the explanation, it's mentioning about the CCP program. It's related with the theoretical, practical, and then study visit. I agree with that mechanism, and we already have using that kind of the program, the CCP. But what the intention is, maybe UNODC not only for the like original issue like drugs or but also new thing that's not provided by other international organization like WCO or etc. Something like new issue like cyber security or etc. And the term of the training, we can collaborate, let's say for domestically, in the LEAP program, as Mr. Adams said, in Surabaya, November 2019, the program with the custom, but custom, Indonesian custom, as our other agency, from the Attorney General, from the National Police, from the Forestry Agency, we collaborate together in the theoretical training, and then we are waiting forward for the next practical training. And other than that's like domestic, in terms of the regional area or the scope area, the other area, UNODC can provide like a regional training. So they have some issue and they can invite custom administration from several countries in the area, in the ASEAN or the Asia Pacific. And during the training, I think it's good enough for us because based on the experience, we can share together what our experience in our side, and we hear from the other side. And we can maintain networking with the other custom administration. If they have case, we can ask not only that data, because sometimes what we have even in the SAN, WCCN, or maybe UNODC also publish about the data, but we don't know yet about who is the perpetrators, who is the importer, who is the exporter. By using the training, other than we can communicate, we also have some information from the other side. And then secondly, the trainer itself, what I see sometimes, the trainers, of course, it's already good that they deliver the information, the best practice, their experience from many countries. But at least my suggestion, the trainer should see what kind of issue of the local means that not only they deliver the information, but they, by understanding the issue of the local country where the training done, they can give some suggestion based on their expertise, based on their experience. Sometimes the legal framework that need to be improved, sometimes the institutional arrangement that need to be improved, not only based on their expertise and information they have, but they try to understand the local. And then the third issue is by doing that, networking, how we can collaborate to tackle down the TNOC networking. We have to maintain the networking. The CCP program, I think it's a good idea because when we have joined the CCP, actually in Indonesia, the CCP program is in Tanjung Priok Port. At the time, Pak Wijayanta still the head of Tanjung Priok Port. So maybe Mr. Kohli at the time is not yet, is still with Mr. Troll, but actually Mr. Wijayanta already there. With the CCP, we have experienced visit to Portland, Haiphong, Lem Chabang, and we also accept that when they're coming. During that time, we maintain the networking, and I hope that's also the intention, I think, why we conduct that activity, that program. We need to maintain sometimes, if we send information through a formal way, through international affair, it's need time. But when an informal way we use, we just, as a special assessment, we just contact other counterpart in the Portland, in Lem Chabang, and it should be maintained. And I think UNODC can play a role in here. You can organize again, like a regional meeting to collect again and to establish some like a meeting yearly or anything. And the fourth one, information sharing. Mr. van der Bergen also mentioning about the information sharing. In here, what we do when we have a cooperation with UNODC, we receive some paper, some research about the data, about the modus operandi. And then we thought that it's important, we share with other officials, to the custom house, to the whole area of Indonesia. And it also can be done by other counterpart in other country. But the most important thing, not only just share information about what we have already there, but the new information, the intelligent information. What we hope from UNODC, with your capacity, with your networking, we also need some new information, intelligent information. That's all from the other country or the other source. You can contact with us. That's some idea that we need to explore further when we cooperate with the UNODC, and how UNODC can contribute with a certain country and with a regional area and with other custom administration. Thank you. And I need, maybe you can comment with the additional information. Thank you very much.
Adam, you first, bro?
Okay, I'll take the first step. Benny, you again, like other questions, this four-parter, man, that's quite a bit. But there are key elements that are of concern for not only UNODC but other organizations. It's about information. It's about using that information in an operational capacity, and it's having the mechanism. Because one of the questions asked about information security or policy. To touch on UNODC is one mechanism. Uh, we are fortunate in the United Nations because we link together so many countries. What is it, 192, 193? Mr. Brown's going to have to correct me, I imagine. But the key, and you raised it a couple of different ways, is that we must work together. There is not one hard, fast way to address this. And that's why in our presentations in delivering our training, one picture I use is fishing boats with nets. It's these nets that have to work together. We have to work in concert with each other to be able to adequately address the threats that face us. As it relates to the trainers, you raise a valid point, and I would say that the trainer that comes to Indonesia or any country that is not his own or her own needs to be aware of what the issues are. But I would also have to say that I'm very cautious at what I recommend. We often say when we make recommendations, they by no means circumvent your laws and your regulations. And you know your laws and your regulations better than I do. I can certainly study them, but we can make observations, and we certainly try to do that. And we will continue to try to do that, not just deliver the information. We certainly appreciate the challenges that are faced and to share that experience. Networking, that is key to not only Indonesia in the region, it is key to the world when it comes to combating transnational organized crime. If we don't communicate with our neighbors in the region, we don't communicate with other nations that are affected by these activities, then it really doesn't help. So it's important that we share information. We have good policies for how we access and use that information, as well as the timeliness of that information. Often we see that the mechanisms exist within the country to share information, but all too often it's dependent upon a person or persons. People get sick, people move to other positions. There are a number of things that happen. So my point by saying that is we have to be flexible, and if we don't have that information that we expect, we need to go and get it. So it needs to be responsive on both sides. We need to facilitate information. We also need to say, hey, we're not getting it. The Customs Enforcement Network, that's supported by the World Customs Organization, certainly is one means of global communication. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime certainly facilitates that in a number of ways through our colleagues on the ground in places such as Jakarta, in our CCP coordinator, as an example, Mr. Ulrich Meiser in Bangkok. There are other mechanisms through other agencies. So that's a global look. We need to look at a bilateral sense through mutual legal assistance agreements to expedite, especially if we notice trends, to establish these mutual legal assistance agreements to expedite the sharing and to enhance the quality of information we get. Getting back to the Container Control Program, we share information. Most of the time that's open source information, just so that we are careful. We don't know all the details. And we find ourselves most often as matchmakers. What do I mean by that? We help with the relationship. So we may not have the information, but we will put, for example, yourself with other colleagues that can get what information is needed and do the job. So there's a number of elements that you brought up that are very important. But to emphasize the network that needs to be in existence, it exists. But there are certainly areas that we can improve upon. There are certainly efforts that need to be taken to strengthen that process. Bob?
No, thank you, Adam. I think you've told most of the things, in fact, that I also wanted to tell. Very quickly, when it comes to a trainer, I mean, for example, we have a trainer from our program, the CCP, based in Bangkok, in fact, which in fact gives them already a bit of more insight, let's say, than when we would send like just a European trainer into the region or into the country. On the other hand, I also think it's always good to have like somebody with fresh ideas coming outside the region, because there might be certain elements outside the region as well that could be applicable in your country as well. So in a way, what we do, we will never pretend to, let's say, to replace a structure or be criticizing. We rather look at the structure which is already in place, and that's where we are trying to complement what is already in place. And I mean, having a regional trainer, he's got already the knowledge of the region and the country, that helps. But again, a fresh eye on this doesn't hurt either. When it comes to the exchange of information, I mean, what we are trying to do with all the 72 countries where we are active, we always ask them if they have a seizure, they have a result, that they are like uploading such kind of a seizure report into the system in the container com. The reason why, let me give you a very practical example. I mean, let's say if there would be a seizure in the Fiji related, let's say, to drugs, for example, and they upload this report into the system. I mean, that doesn't have to be too detailed, but if you see which company or which modus operandi is there, it might be that company that is being involved in the Fiji also has got its commercial activities, for example, in Indonesia. Well, then it's of course very good for you that you see this modus operandi, because clearly you can also include this into your risk matrix in your own country. It also gives you the opportunity in a way to communicate in a secure way with the people in Fiji, because you see the person who has uploaded the report, and it gives you the opportunity to discuss this in more detail. So this is also one of the important elements. But again, I must admit, there you also come to, let's say, to the personality. I mean, sometimes we got people or countries reporting very well. Some other countries, it might be a bit less. But as Adam correctly stated, I mean, the mechanism is there. I'm not going to tell more about networking, exchange information, because I think Adam addressed them all, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we as a UNODC, we also have several different programs, such as the cyber program, for example. And I mean, Mr. Brown is also there. He's very well aware of all those programs. And for sure, I mean, if you have any questions or whatever to see how we can fit this in, I mean, we are more than happy to discuss in more detail to see how this can complement, in fact, the activities which are already present in the country. I'll stick to this because there might be any other questions to give opportunity to other participants to ask their questions. But thank you again for your very interesting remarks and observations.
Well, thank you very much. We will continue the question from the Zoom chat room. The question is from Mr. Eddie, Belgium. What about the privacy laws in the EU towards exchange of information? To Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to have to pass on this one because I'm not as familiar with privacy laws in the EU. So I don't know whether Adam or a colleague can enlighten them. I certainly don't. I'm not as versed on the privacy laws in the US, in the EU, to be able to, I think, knowledgeably respond to that question. Sorry.
If you allow me.
Sure.
Thank you very much. No, first of all, thank you very much, Eddie. I know he's a compatriot of me, so we have already met in the past as well. And I think, well, I'm not going to tell anything secret, but for us, Eddie, how we work with CCP, clearly when information is being exchanged by, let's say, the container com, so the communication tool that we use, in fact, it's like exchange of information among customs, police, even customs police. This depends from country to country, as you know. I mean, also in Europe, this goes from country to country. In some of the countries, we can work, let's say, based on the informal information that you receive on the condition that you send at the same time, like a regulatory commission, in fact, to the source country, in fact, where you are asking or requesting for the information in, let's say, in an official way. Again, in some of the countries this works. I have to be honest with you, and I'm sure you know much more better than I do, Eddie, that's how it works in the region, in Southeast Asia and South Asia. When it comes to Europe, I mean, Belgium, it's quite a very flexible country when it comes to exchanging information in this way. As you know, another country, and this is not criticizing that I'm going to do, I mean, because this has got all to do with the restrictions related to legislation. But for example, we know the Netherlands, that's much more difficult, in fact, to come to an exchange of information, unless from the first moment, in fact, it's already addressed in an official way by means of a regulatory commission or a request of mutual assistance. So, I mean, this is in fact the reality, but I wouldn't know what to comment more. So I hope at least I've answered part of your question, Eddie.
Okay, thank you, sir. So for the next question from the chat room. So it's from Bumira Sukmawati from Indonesia to Mr. Vandenberg. So the question is, if customs officer find nuclear waste smuggled, how do they destroy it? Or should it be processed based on law process first? Can nuclear waste just be sent back to the sender country? And nuclear waste and chemical waste are dangerous because it can give exposure to bad health of human. So sorry, even it can make explosion just as in Lebanon. Please, Mr. Vandenberg.
Adam, are you still there? Because I think this is more your area to respond.
Yes, and we touched upon it already a little bit. This is not hard, fast. I can't give you a black-white answer again. There are a number of agencies that would be involved in this situation. I mentioned Bataan and Bapatan in Indonesia. The regulatory authorities, possibly civil defense. I mentioned the International Atomic Energy works with member states to address this particular issue. When it is found, it's important to have procedures. This is one element, and certainly something that we're talking about with Lebanon, with other countries within the container control program. Procedures to identify when something like this is concerned, what to do and how to do it. The question was asked, can nuclear waste just be sent back to the sender country? It's not always that easy. As you rightly mentioned, there could be health issues involved. Also, the captain of the vessel, if we're talking about sea cargo, captain of the vessel can say, no, I'm not going to accept responsibility for that. So these elements will have to be taken into consideration when decisions are being made to what is the disposition and how best to handle it. So it will be many organizations. It would also look at possibly where it came from, where it transited, and so on. So it'll bring a lot of resources to bear when or if this type of situation that the question referred to should happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vandenberg. And then the next question. The next question is from Mr. Trevo Kitau, Papua New Guinea. In Papua New Guinea, these drugs mentioned are not really taken widely apart from marijuana. But my question is that we have a transnational syndicate using PNG as a transit hub for moving these illicit items. How can we effectively network within this region to monitor such this in the syndicate? For three of you, please, Mr. Brown or Mr. Vandenberg or Mr. Adam.
It's an excellent question, and one I think that really drives to the heart of this, right? And it's a question around how do you interact with and cooperate with your colleagues in the region. I always like to have these questions answered by other pairs, right? I mean, I can sit here and run through a litany of ways that can happen, and we certainly always also like to facilitate bringing member states and so on together around some of these issues. But I think from the fundamental aspect of that question is how do you facilitate, enhance cooperation outside of with your neighbors and within your regions in terms of sharing of information, sharing of intelligence, as the question suggests that PNG is a transit for some of the method I assume he's referring to that's going through there. No, certainly I agree that PNG issue is more around marijuana, but I think the question is suggesting the transit, PNG being used as a transit for drugs, for methamphetamines particularly. And so that is where the need for having the type of networking, the type of sharing of information outside with your neighbors, having an understanding of where the route of these drugs are coming from, and then begin to have the conversation through, well, now COVID is limiting being able to visit and to have meetings face to face, but certainly the opportunities to still arrange and talk to your neighbors and talk to your colleagues throughout the region via virtual platforms is certainly there. I'll use an example in Indonesia, which I'm more familiar with. The drug agency here, the National Narcotics Board, routinely, and this was prior to the pandemic, routinely would visit countries within the region and outside of the region, South Asia, Europe, even for that matter. But a lot of visits were made with meeting, networking was done with its neighbors. There are a lot of memorandum of understandings that were signed, agreements, cooperative agreements, and so on, that were signed with its neighbors in terms of sharing information and so on. That's critical because, no country lives in a vacuum, right? And as long as you have borders, you are going to have a movement through and between your borders. And so you have to interact with, you have to set up the mechanisms between between countries to be able to facilitate that sharing of information. Oftentimes, unfortunately, sometimes you do have the relationships between, frontline officers or, individual to individuals, but the systematic and the institutional mechanisms are not there in order to share that information. And people move, people change, people rotate, and so on and so forth. And you have to have those mechanisms in place, formal mechanisms in place that's going to share information, and not just share information, about, after the fact, but share information in terms of what can be done, having the conversations about what can be done to prevent, and also being able to share information real time. So I think it certainly is is incumbent upon, in this case, with reference to PNG, is certainly incumbent upon PNG to reach out to its neighbors. And certainly I think UNODC has played that role in terms of bringing folks together and facilitating those discussions happening. And so I certainly would encourage that. And where you think we may be of assistance, please reach out to us, and we perhaps as well can help in terms of facilitating some of that. So thank you. I'll just stop there. Over.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So we have the last questions from the participants from Zoom. So please, Bapak Dimas Yureza. Please unmute your microphone, sir.
Please unmute your microphone.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That's a
Okay,
problem
we can hear you. Thank you.
About the unmute process. My warm regards to Mr. Collie Brown and Bob Vanderberg and Mr. Adam. I'm sorry if I pronounced wrong or different. I think we as not the expert of international law should be have enlightenment from all of you about the participants of this UN Office on Drugs and Crimes, because as we know that UN members are about more than 190 countries. Please correct me if I am wrong, but from your slide I can see there are only 72 participants countries of this UN office. So I think it might be a little bit problem, since when we are talking about transorganized crime, all of the participants of the common concern, maybe there are a common concern from every nation that transorganized crime is something that we have to cooperate cooperatively to handle or tackle these matters. Of course, there are such a difference between the trans-organized crime, between international crimes, which is international crimes is already, crimes against humanity that we can acknowledge as a crimes against humanity. But I think nowadays, with the extensively globalizations, the most problem that touch us in the ground, it's transorganized crimes more than the international crimes like genocide or something, because there are all eyes are on that matter. So the international organization can help us. And talk about the concern that from your slides, you are concerned of focusing about the seaports and everything. As we know, the stakeholders of the that ports and borders are not only customs. There are minimums, maybe 10 or 11 in every country is different. As we know that not every countries have a cooperative border protection. Like, for example, in Indonesia, there are different institutions like customs, immigration, and quarantines itself. So how this UN Office on Drugs and Crimes collaborate the cooperative perspective in every nations that who is participating in this program, CCO programs, how there are too many stakeholders and how you cooperate them. Thank you for the chance.
Please,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vanderberg or
Maybe,
Mr. Bessler or Mr. Brown.
yeah, maybe I'll take first the floor if you don't mind, Adam. First of all, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you say that our program has got activities in 72 countries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are not interacting with much more countries. When we implement our program, or before we start implementing the program, in fact, we always ask, let's say, first, if there is any interest of the country for the program itself. And once that we've got, let's say, the interest of the country, we go and talk with donors. Once the donors are in place, that's in fact where the entire mechanism of the implementation of the container control program starts. This is where we are with 72 countries. But I mean, and now I come back also to the container com. I mean, the exchange of information. So this is the secured communication tool that we use. More than 100 countries are connected to this system. So it's much more than the 72 countries, which means in fact that this system will enable you to contact or to exchange information and experiences with much more countries than the 72. I mean, to name you some examples, the National Targeting Center in the US is connected to this. The National Targeting Center of Canada is connected to this. The Australian Border Force is connected to this. We got European countries with the big maritime ports important, like Antwerp in Belgium, Le Havre in France, Rotterdam, the Netherlands, Hamburg in Germany. They are all connected to this system, which in fact means that you are very well connected, and it's more than 72 countries. It's also because we are a bit limited through funding that we are only at 72 countries, because there are many other countries who are interested also to join the program, but this is an issue, unfortunately, that is related to funding. Secondly, I would also like to emphasize, I mean, we as a UNODC, we can support, we will assist governments, but we in fact are not, let's say, the implementing authority. I mean, each unit that is being established, we will guide them with capacities, we can deliver training, we can make you part of an international communication network, all those kinds of things, in fact, we can do. But the unit itself, this is clearly country owned. I mean, those people are working for their legislation, for their country, which means clearly also that we can provide you with some advice, but in the end, the decision is taken by the country itself or by the agency itself. When it comes to which, let's say, agencies are being involved in the container control program, this is something we discuss each time when we start up the program, meaning we have a talk with the authorities, and we're going to have a look which agencies do have competency within the port, and for sure when it comes related to container trafficking. Clearly, we are all aware that, let's say, in 99% of the cases across the globe, that it is customs who is receiving all the key information when it comes to commercial container trafficking, cargo trafficking, meaning you've got the manifest, the bill of lading, the booking references, the customs declarations, and so on. So clearly, customs is key, let's say, in this story. On the other hand, I mean, why working with interagency principles? It might be customs officers receive all the information related to a cargo, but at some point they might be identifying a potential or a suspicious company. I mean, if you have a police officer sitting next to you, he's got access to other databases, because it might be, for example, that the owner of this company already has been in touch with police before, related to, let's say, to narcotics or whatever other kind of infringement, which clearly is a key element. This you need to know when you are doing your profiling and you're analyzing. So in this sense, it's clearly very important that, let's say, you put the different agencies all together in the same office, so you got like a live exchange of information and experiences, and that you can gather all the information which is at your disposal at that moment to do your work. Again, we can advise countries to work with interagency principles, and we encourage this also to do this, but in the end, it's a decision of the country itself which agencies are involved in this. And in this sense, I would also very quickly like to come back, let's say, to in fact what was proposed already. I mean, because this has got also to do, you know, with exchange of information at regional level, to say so, but that we as a CCP, UNODC, I mean, we can support Indonesia facilitating regional meetings. We can already facilitate training as well. We've got funding available. So we would be more than happy also to, let's say, to support Indonesia and other countries in the region in regards to this. Adam, I don't know if you've got something to.
Just a couple of points, Bob, to add to what you said. Let's not lose sight that even the container control program is a partnership program. We are doing this in concert with the World Customs Organization. Also, when it comes to air cargo, with the International Civil Aviation Organization, as well as other international law enforcement, such as Interpol. So to be clear, we're not acting alone, and that's key. That's one of the underlying elements when we talk about transnational organized crime is the networking, the cooperation that takes place. There needs to be some structure. There needs to be sending information. There needs to be confirming receipt of the information. So when we talk about these seizures that are facilitated by information received from other places, we also need to respond and say thank you, and we had a success. So there's a number of elements that go to this sharing of information. Certainly, UNODC has the field offices with our regional office in Bangkok and there in Jakarta. There are mechanisms that try to facilitate that, but in the end, it's the member state working together. So it's Indonesia working with the other states in the region. We can help facilitate, as Bob said, but the strength is what you possess already.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Adam. We still have one question from the Zoom room chat. Is it okay? Hello, sir.
Go ahead. We'll take our best shot at it.
Yes.
Okay. The question is from Miss Milian Rishdan, Indonesia. Some countries see traditional crime as a legal problem, and some see it as a threat for national security. If they see it as just a crime, they will just use justice force or police and judicial system to fight it. While when they see it as a national security problem, they will use their armed force. How do UNODC see this? Which approach is more effective to deal with this transnational crime? Judicial approach or military approach? And how UNODC see Philippine extrajudicial efforts to fight against drug dealer? Please, sir.
Adam, you want to take this first, or I take?
Okay, so I get on the hot seat first. Mr. Brown, I'm looking to you too. That if you could go ahead and put the question back on the screen again, please. So the question here is using a system of justice, vice, armed forces. We support this system of laws and regulations. However, we are working to the benefit of the member state. The question is a bit challenging because a member state makes a decision whether they use the type of not just force but resources to address what it identifies as criminal, and that makes it very, very challenging on its own. We support and we have many programs within the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Our namesake, we came from two commissions: the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, which addresses that particular element. To have a set of laws and regulations, to have consequences that match the crime that has been adjudicated, and to look at what type of punishments will be meted out, as opposed to the military approach. Again, this is something that the state would have to look at. There are other elements that come into play when this occurs. You have other elements in the United Nations process, the United Nations Security Council, and there are many situations that reach the Security Council that result in recommendations that then turn into sanctions and embargoes to work with member states to change the behavior. So it's not a black white if a country feels that it's necessary. Asking about specifically the Philippine extrajudicial, that is something that they've identified. One common element of the United Nations is human rights. And when we talk about human rights, to have human rights, we need to have that system of laws and regulations. We need to have the concern of the person, what crime did they commit, to be balanced and looked at what the penalties are and how it meets. So it's a general answer. I would defer to Mr. Brown to weigh in as well, please. Sorry, dude.
Thank you, Adam. Listen. Not much more to add to what was said. I mean, I think, responding to transnational organized crime is not a single agency effort. No single agency can address this issue. If you have strong law enforcement that bring people to book, and you have weak prosecutorial systems that then allow them to walk, that's not a successful effort. And so it really does require the collective efforts of all the relevant agencies and within government, within a government, to address. And so that's one of when we look at the criminal justice continuum, where it's important from the point of of detecting the crime, to prosecuting the crime, to a disposition at the judicial aspect of it, and then certainly, of course, into prisons as part of that continuum. I think it's important that those elements of that criminal justice continuum are structured and have the capacity to manage. We see many instances where people are arrested for crimes and arrested for drugs in this case, or other transnational organized crime, and end up in prison and continue to carry out the activities that landed them there in the first place. So it does require the collective whole of government to bring that forward. I mean, I think this is law enforcement and responding to these transnational organized crime effort. Most people would argue in terms of best practices that it is a law enforcement function. Clearly, I think governments certainly do have their own prerogative in terms of how, in aspects where they may utilize the military, particularly in border areas, to supplement interdicting these crimes. But certainly, I think it is a law enforcement function. Regarding the issue on Philippines, I mean, the only thing I would add is that certainly to echo what Adam said, and certainly everyone is entitled to due process, and that's a fundamental part of justice, is for someone to have due process. And so that I'll just add that there and leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So we are sorry to other participants that have asked questions. We will relay your questions and get back to you later. So everyone, as that's the last question, we have come to the end of our webinar. Now we would like to ask Mr. Brown, Mr. Van der Berg, and Mr. Besseler to give a closing statement, please, sir.
let me just I think my mic is okay. Let me just in terms of closing, just thank again the Directorate of Customs and Excise for organizing this event. I think it certainly is very timely, not only in terms of the issue, but I think timely in terms of the climate that we are in. Because as I mentioned, I think the pandemic has opened a number of new gateways for organized crime groups to exploit, and it certainly is incumbent in terms of being aware of what those are and then being able to develop the required strategies and so on to address that. So I think it's very timely discussion. I know we do have participants from all over the world, and I certainly want to thank them all for the time to be here and to have this robust discussion. And to both my colleagues, Adam and Adam Batchelor and Mr. Vandenberg, thank you very much for sharing this platform with me in terms of the presentations that we've done. And I hope that the participants did find them very helpful. I'm certainly, if folks want to reach out to me, I think I will share the presentation, and the organizers can certainly share that with you. My email is there. My primary responsibility is Indonesia as a country manager here. Certainly, we do coordinate with throughout our field offices in not only in Indonesia but around the globe in terms of much of this. But I certainly would be happy if folks want to follow up and with whatever that might be. And I certainly welcome. Also, I always welcome exchanges with folks in understanding more in terms of what people are doing around the world. So thank you very much for being here, and all the best. Thank you. Over.
You're welcome. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Brown, Mr. Vandenberg, and Mr. Adam, for the very insightful presentation and discussion. It's an honor to have you both here.
Our performance in delivering topics to this event. Once again, we would like to remind all of you to fill the application form that can be accessed through the link written below.
Materials and other information related to this webinar are also available in the link. And make sure you fill the application and the evaluation form to get the certificate. The certificate ES account.
Thanks to all of the participants who have joined us. We hope what we have delivered today could be beneficial for you all. I'm Siti.
I'm Nella.
See you on other Customs Class webinar.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.